one of the best resources that you have in your relationships are boundaries. And boundaries is one of my favorite subjects to talk about because I didn't have them for so long and my relationships were such a mess. And when I started learning about boundaries and started implementing them, it was very difficult and very uncomfortable, very challenging. But in the end, I saw how effective it is at making your relationships healthier and helping you to be healthier as a person. So let's talk about some of the benefits of having boundaries. I'm going to have to move my head over. One of the biggest one is it wards off burnout. If we're constantly saying yes to everyone, trying to please everyone, never disappointing anyone, we're going to get really burnt out. We only have so much energy and we are limited creatures. And so, especially when we're giving a lot of that energy and that time and that space to people who are just taking it and using us and using us for their own selfish purposes. Those are usually the loudest people in our lives. And so if we're constantly trying to give to them and trying to keep them happy and satisfied, trying to satisfy them in some way, we're going to get burnt out at some point. And so when we implement these boundaries, it helps us to utilize our energy in better ways. Improves our emotional health. It obviously improves our relationships. It sets clear expectations for others of how that you want to be treated and how you will treat them. Because you want to be treated that way, you're going to extend that same courtesy to them. Decreases our stress, improves our self-care abilities. It gives us respect from others and self-respect. If we can't trust ourselves in ways to say no, to know when we're at our limits, to know when it's too much, we're going to have a lot of internal problems because our nervous systems are going to consider us to be in danger in a lot of areas because we don't have a no. We're not able to say no. We're always just giving whatever is required or whatever is desired, and we end up with nothing in the end to facilitate ourselves. And so our nervous systems consider that dangerous, and they're going to activate a lot quicker and a lot more. It also promotes autonomy, helps you stand on your own 2 feet, so to speak, and know what you want and what you don't want, how you want to be treated, how you don't want to be treated. So how do we even go about setting boundaries? Let me talk about this first. The reason why we need boundaries, if you can imagine, if you decided that you weren't going to have any boundaries in your life, when you moved into a home or an apartment or whatever, you're going to not put a door on it. There's no doors, no fences, no property lines, nothing like that. You're just going to allow whoever wants to come in and to do whatever they want. And you're going to deal with it, however that happens, however that works. You can imagine the people that would start to come into your property. They would start to destroy things. They would start to take things. Usually the people that are the most destructive are the ones that are going to push their way in and force their way in and take full advantage of everything that you give them, right? And so you would just have destruction on your hands, basically. And so a lot of times we do that in our relationships. We just open ourselves up and just become vulnerable to just anybody and allow intimacy with anybody. And think of ourselves as a bad person if we say no, or if we say that's not going to work for me. And so in a lot of ways, we're doing that same thing. We're just removing all the doors from our life and all the fences from our life and all the properties from our life. And you can imagine what that does to us as people, but also to relationships. We're not getting the relationships with the people that can really benefit from our presence in their lives, and vice versa. And so if we don't utilize boundaries in our lives, or if we're soft on boundaries, we're going to end up getting and attracting the people that just want to take advantage, that just want to use people, that just are very selfish and selfishly ambitious. And so they will come into our lives and take whatever we give them. And that's what we'll end up attracting. So that's why we want to set these boundaries. It's not to necessarily keep people away or punish them or keep, it's not to be like me. It's more of an interface that allows us to develop and cultivate healthy relationships and help other people be healthy as well. Many times when people start to see you setting boundaries and sticking by those, it's going to inspire them to do the same. They're going to see the changes that brings about in your life. And that will be helpful to others as well. So to go about this, we want to start by examining our emotions when we're with people in certain situations. What really gets our goat? Like what ticks us off? What irritates us? That's probably where we need a boundary. What makes us afraid? What makes us dread? What makes us feel guilty? All of those things in relationships are where we probably need to think about putting up a boundary, or at least deciding what we're willing to put up with and what we're going to say absolutely not. That's not going to be something in my life. We want to start protecting our peace in a way, and being able to live healthy lives, safe lives. If our nervous systems don't feel safe, remember, they're going to activate. And so we want to make sure our relationships feel safe. The people that we are the most intimate with are the ones that we can be ourselves around and feel safe around. Allow inaccuracy. And what I mean by that is when you're beginning to set boundaries, you're going to get it wrong. You're going to put too hard of a boundary, or you're going to put too soft of a boundary. There's going to have to be some flexibility at where these boundaries are going to end up. But in the beginning, if we start to guilt and shame ourselves, or if we start to think, we're ruining everything, we're ruining all our relationships with these boundaries, we're going to stop doing it, right? We're going to actually stay away from it and think that it's a bad thing when it's really not. It's just uncomfortable and it's challenging. And you're learning something new. And when you learn something new, you're going to end up making mistakes, and you're going to have to fix those mistakes sometimes. You may have to go back to someone and apologize. Or you may have to say, you know what, I really screwed that up. I need a stronger boundary in this area. So it's all about learning. It's all about coming to those right conclusions for your life and your calling and the things that you're supposed to be doing, your purpose here on earth. You could read books. I've read several books on setting boundaries, and they have been helpful, and they've given me, standards to kind of go by, and they've helped me to know if I'm on the right track, but they have not given me the specific boundaries that I need to set in my own life. And I have still, even after reading those books, had to determine that, and sometimes redetermine that when it didn't work out the way that I thought that it should or that it would. It might be helpful at first to offer options to someone that you're setting a boundary with. So, if somebody has asked you to do something for them, they need you to babysit their kids on a certain day. Maybe their kids are a mess and you don't want any part of that, but you could say, well, I can't babysit your kids on this certain day, but I could, and whatever you could do in that scenario, like give them a second option that makes it feel like you're not saying, I don't want anything to do with you, but you're saying, I don't have the capacity to do this thing that you've asked me to do. Or if somebody's moving and they need you to help them come move on a certain day and you just can't do it for one reason or another, I can't help you move on this day, but could I provide a meal for the crew that's going to be there working? Things like that. Now, do you have to do this? Absolutely not. And there are some relationships where our no just needs to be no, and it does not even need to be explained. I had somebody that I dearly love and am just inspired by. The other day I had asked them if they would like to do something a certain thing, and they came back and said, no, I'm not going to be able to do that. And it was just that's it. There was no explanation of why they couldn't. There was nothing. And I'll be honest, like at first I was a little taken aback. I was like, oh, well, what does this mean? That, this person doesn't like me, that they don't ever want me to ask again? I can't answer any of those questions. I'm not inside that person's head, but that's not my job. My job is to honor the boundary that they've set. And, with this specific person in the future, I may reach out again. And if I keep getting, a decline or rejection or, that kind of response, I may, re-examine where I'm at in that relationship. Maybe it's one-sided. Maybe it's not two-sided. Okay. So once we set those boundaries, we don't need to back down from them. And what I mean by that is boundaries, especially if you have not been setting them in your life, and if you do not have good boundaries, they are going to make other people uncomfortable. Just like I said before with the text from my friend, I was uncomfortable with that, but I recognized it as a boundary. And because I honor that relationship, I'm going to honor that boundary, of course. And honoring people means honoring their boundaries. So if someone is uncomfortable with your boundaries, but they keep coming at you, don't give in to that. Even if you think, well, maybe I'm wrong for setting this boundary, or maybe it is too hard, or maybe, maybe this, maybe that. In that specific instance, you need to keep that boundary, because that's filtering a relationship to see how much this person is going to honor you, how much they're going to find peace with the boundary that you set. And if it's the wrong one, you can always come back later and say, I'm really sorry. I'm still working on this, whatever it is. But if the person is not going to honor it, if they're going to keep pushing at you, that's a red flag that may be a relationship that you don't need in your life, that is creating some distress and some stress in the situation. We also don't want to try to control people with our boundaries. Boundaries are not to control others. As a matter of fact, we have no control over others. They only can control themselves. We only can control ourselves. We have responsibility over our emotions, how we react to things, how we respond to things, what boundaries we establish in our lives, and they have that same responsibility. So don't try to use boundaries to control someone or to make them act a certain way or do a certain thing for you. Boundaries are more so that you are at peace with yourself and that you feel healthy and that people know what it's going to take to form that intimacy with you. And they have to decide if they're willing to do that. Also, don't cling to people. When you start setting boundaries, you're going to see your relationships shift. And I saw this a good bit in my life, and it was very hard. This is the hard part and the challenging part, because there are people that we love, that we dearly love, that we have not seen the ways that they are taking advantage of us, and they are, in the relationship for their own good, and they're not so much concerned about us or the health of our lives. They're concerned about their own life. And so when we see this, it can be very hurtful because we've loved this person so dearly, right? And so we have a tendency to just be like, oh no, never mind, cling to that relationship, try to find a way to work it out so they won't leave us. Especially if you've had anybody that you trust, abandoned you in the past. Sometimes that can carry over to other relationships, and you can be like deathly afraid of losing someone. And what you need to know, this is why it gains you more autonomy. What you need to know is you will be okay without this person. God specifically designed you intricately to be able to exist and survive and even thrive. Even if you just had your relationship with him, you would be okay. And so you don't need to cling to people that aren't contributing. Like, they don't want to contribute in any way. They just want to take what you're giving. And so boundaries will really weed out those people. And it's a lot of times why people are afraid of even setting them, because they don't want to see, they don't want their eyes to be open to this kind of stuff. They would rather just pretend and keep going the way that things are and make themselves feel better that this person really is for them, when really this person may be completely against them and just for themselves. So, what do we need to do some boundary work? The first thing I feel like we need, and the first thing that I did, is a relationship evaluation. So what I actually did was on paper, actually on a notepad on my phone, I just went and listed all the people in my life that I dealt with on a regular basis, that I had a relationship with. When we say relationship, we're not talking about acquaintances. We're not talking about people you just run into every now and then. Not talking about your favorite clerk at the grocery store. We're talking about people that you have a relationship with. You're involved in their life, and they're involved in your life. And so I started listing out those people, and then I started listing out, kind of where I felt like they were contributing, where to my life, where I felt like there was some issues, but I kind of just did an evaluation of each of those relationships and kind of set myself up to see on paper how I needed to prioritize these relationships as far as my boundary work, and as far as how much energy and time and love and all of the things I wanted to pour into these relationships. Then I did some self-introspection. I kind of looked at, like I said before, examined my emotions, examined some of my feelings about these people and why I was having them, and what it was that was rubbing on our relationship, the cons of the relationship, maybe some things that I have not spoken up about that I probably need to speak up about, some ways that I felt like I couldn't disagree, or I couldn't state my own opinion without really frustrating the other person. And I just kind of looked at that to see where I needed to put my boundaries. I also recommend, I did not at the time have many people around me that could do this in a very strong way, but to have some support to set these boundaries. So when you're going to set boundaries, it's hard to do it if you don't know on the other side of setting this boundary, even if you lose this person, there's other relationships in your life that you're still going to have. That can be very helpful to setting boundaries and make it a little bit less painful. So there may be a certain person who knows this relationship in your life, or several relationships in your life, that they may have even in the past been encouraging you to set boundaries, or encouraging you that you've been treated wrongly, that kind of thing. You may need this person to kind of support you through the process of setting these boundaries. Then at the end, once I got through with all of that, I kind of developed a list of boundaries. I can't tell you exactly how this list will look. I think that it will look different for everyone, but it was kind of like my property line versus my fence versus my door. You know, we might let the delivery people onto our property. We might even let some of them, if they're bringing a box or something that we need, up to our door, but we're not going to open the door and be like, come on in, you know. Most of the time, that's not how it works. There's other people that we will allow, like, you know, to come on our property to do work or whatever, but we're not just going to invite them into our bedroom, you know. So that was kind of what I did with my boundaries. First, you know, looked at my intimacy level with the people that were around me, and then, you know, what I was going to allow in those relationships in the future, and what I wasn't going to allow. After you set that list of boundaries, I think some of the hardest work is working with yourself to not get defensive, to be able to set these boundaries in a way that is loving and isn't like, well, you know, isn't accusatory. It's not against the other person, but it is just for your health and for the health of the relationship. Some people don't see that boundaries will help the relationship be healthier. And many times they don't see that is because they've had some gain. They've had a lot of gain from the relationship being unhealthy. And so they're not necessarily interested in making it a healthy relationship. And if you have people like that in your life, it's not that you have to kick them totally out of your life, but they need to go on the outside of your property line. In some cases, they don't need to even be on the property. And if they come on the property, they definitely need to stay outside the fence, right? So just a couple of things about boundaries. It's a really wide and deep subject, but it's also such a great resource. And I would totally recommend any type of learning, any type of knowledge that you can gain about boundaries. Lisa Turkhurst is one of my favorite people to do this, and I'm going to put a couple of her books in the description. Also, she has a podcast called Therapy and Theology, and I feel like it's really good for integrating, the therapeutic type resources in with spiritual resources. So it's a very good integrated podcast. So I will put links to that stuff in the description. And we're going to talk about connection next.